Thinking about coming to Australia on a working holiday visa, but you want to make sure you can financially support yourself? Then this video is for you. Hey guys, it's Claudia here from Welcome to Travel, and in this video I'll explain what you can expect from working in Australia if you are on a working holiday visa. The topics I'll cover will include who can work and the visa rules, the types of jobs and some real experiences of our travellers, minimum wages, awards and entitlements, and how you can save the most. Wherever you are in the world, I can promise you the most stressful part about travelling 100% of the time is money. I mean, aside from packing and the actual traveling itself, like overnight buses, sleeping in airports, hitchhiking. These things definitely make the list, but budget, money and its restrictions will always be my number one. The very nature of being a traveller is always wanting to do more, see more, explore more, eat more, and probably drink more as well. And all this is very hard to do on a backpacker budget. Luckily, being on a working holiday visa makes it very easy to work in Australia. If you come over on either a 417 or a 462 visa, then you automatically have full working rights in Australia with very few restrictions. You can work in any job, in any industry, and anywhere in the country. The main restriction being you can only work with one employer for up to 6 months. Some ways around this would be if you worked for a larger company that has locations in multiple states, and say for example if you worked at the Melbourne branch, you could hypothetically get transferred to the Sydney branch and your 6 months limit would reset, but you're still working for the same company. Amazing way to get around this 6 months rule as well that many people aren't actually aware of is you could have 12 months in the same job if you plan your working holiday structure correctly. Now, I have already explained how to structure your working holiday correctly in my last video, but basically if you complete your farm work in your first 6 months and have your second year visa granted, then you start a job that you absolutely love in your last 6 months of your first year. Then once your second year starts, it actually resets the 6 month rule, meaning you can stay with the same employer for an additional 6 months and totaling 12 months or a year. How smart is that? And it's a little working holiday hack for you. This is why it is so important to do your traveling and your farm work in the first half of your first year in Australia to make sure you actually love this country enough to be able to justify working towards getting a second year visa and doing farm work. And you can only figure this out if you travel the country and fall in love with it first. To get a second year in the country, you need to complete 88 days of rural work, which tends to be in postcodes far away from the major cities. The 88 days does not need to be consecutive, and to ensure you do not run out of time to get these 88 days signed off by an employer before your first year runs out, do not try to squeeze in this farm work in the last 88 days of your first year. I'm telling you right now, you will run out of time. An amazing update to visa extension work was introduced in June of 2021 and means you can now work in a hospitality or a tourism job in northern or remote Australia, and it will also count towards your 88 days, so it's not just farm work. I will actually dedicate the next episode to this series to explain what type of jobs you can expect on your working holiday. But right now, to provide you with some more clarity, I'm actually going to share some real stories and experiences from our own travellers on where they worked in Australia, what they did, how much they were paid, and if they were able to save. Jordan is from the US and she's currently working in Sydney and doing 2 bartending jobs. One is right on Sydney Harbour where her base rate is 35 Australian dollars, plus she gets a casual loading on top of that on Sundays, so she gets 43 Australian dollars per hour. The other is a speakeasy styled bar where she earns a base rate of $27 plus a casual loading again on weekends, and she earns around $200 in tips a month. Now, she did also explain this, so I'm just going to quote her. She says, "Finding hospitality work in Sydney is incredibly easy. I've been joking with my friends back home that every time I get drunk, I get offered a job." That said, I did come with 3 years bar experience prior to landing, but I have seen many people hired in my last few weeks, and honestly, the only real requirement the managers are looking for is that you speak well enough English to communicate with guests and team members, and everything else is easily transferable and trainable. Next we have Dylan from Canada, and he's currently on his second year visa and working along the West Coast. He says there are so many work opportunities where you can save up amazing money working FIFO jobs, which stands for fly in and fly out, and predominantly within the mining industry. So in the past few months, Dylan has worked as a driller's offsider, mine site cleaner, and is about to fly out to another location for a trades assistant role. So he also writes, he's not spending a dime on food or accommodation. So for the 1 to 4 weeks, depending on the contract, you pocket every cent, and you do get paid around $35 to $40 Australian per hour. In his first year, he did also do the standard fruit picking jobs, which are very easy to find, and he was getting paid $26 an hour. But he did spend a little bit more on drinking, as he was living and working with so many other backpackers doing the same thing, who became a bit of a family and just really enjoyed hanging out together. Now, if getting into the mining industry in Western Australia is something that you're considering, Dylan says it does require some more qualifications, which I will explain in more detail in my next video, where I focus a little bit more closely on actual jobs. Marie from Denmark is working in the beautiful town of Apollo Bay after she fell in love with it after seeing it on our Great Ocean road trip add-on. She's working at the Western Motel and Apartments as a cleaner and all-rounder. She gets a base rate of $27 Australian on weekdays, and on weekends and public holidays she gets more. Her shifts are typically from 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m, so she gets to enjoy the whole afternoon and soak up the fact that she lives in one of Australia's most iconic beach towns. She also regularly has the option to work longer hours to earn more money and help the team out. Marie says, and I quote, "The job is super easy and I really enjoy it. The people I work with are so nice and helpful. I'm so glad I chose to work here. I get to know the locals and I can spend all my free time on the beach." Then you have our girl Lindy from the US, who got an all-rounder position in the Northern Territory that we helped secure for her. She did this for 3 months and flew right up after her Welcome to Melbourne tour. She had such a great experience and was able to save so much money. Her story was picked up by multiple media outlets who reported on it. In 3 months, she managed to save a whopping 15,000 Australian dollars or 8,000 pounds. And I'll link the article in the description below so you can read all about her experience. Now, another one of our travelers who joined us on tour before COVID is still in Australia, so he's obviously pretty fond of it, and he's working as a hospitality professional. I'm keeping his name anonymous because he's been very generous in disclosing a lot of his own financial information for you to help you understand what can be earned in Australia. So he's been a jackaroo on a cattle station in Queensland, a bar and restaurant manager at a Melbourne nightclub, a hotel venue manager in rural New South Wales, and right now he's a manager at a whiskey cocktail bar in Canberra. So here is a rundown of all his jobs. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to look more closely at the details. Again, he was kind enough to disclose and send this information for the benefit of this video, specifically to help you guys in your research. Lastly, we have Kathy from Canada, who settled down in Melbourne with her partner and worked in retail. Here is a rundown of her pay and hours working as a sales consultant in Melbourne City. Keep in mind she did have prior experience in this field, which made getting a job for her very easy. Her main advice for saving when you live in a city full of temptations is to bring your own snacks and always pack your lunches for work. She always used to shop at fresh food markets like the Queen Victoria or the Paran Market, and she religiously only shopped with cash, so she knew exactly what she had budgeted and how much she had spent. And also meal prep when you can. Now on to minimum wages, entitlements and awards. As mentioned in my previous video, the national minimum wage of Australia is now $21.38, which is the absolute minimum you should be earning across all industries and jobs, and is actually the highest minimum wage in the world. And I've gone ahead and done a little equation for you so you can put this into perspective. Let's compare how many minutes on minimum wage you have to work for a beer in your country. I've gone with Melbourne and the major cities in some countries to make this fair. So as you can see, here is what half a litre of beer tends to cost in these currencies and how many minutes you have to work to earn that beer on the minimum wage. So for Melbourne, 25 minutes, London, 41 minutes, New York, 61 minutes, Toronto, 35, Munich, 26, and Amsterdam, 31. So out of all 5 comparisons, only one country comes close to Australia, and that is Germany, and we all know how much they love their beer. Now onwards to these things called awards or modern awards, which are legal documents that outline the minimum pay rates and conditions of employment across all industries. There are more than 100 industry or occupation awards that cover most people who work in Australia. Now a major update that has heavily benefited working holiday makers is the changes to the horticultural awards, which was implemented in April of this year. The Fair Work Commission now says workers on farms must now be paid a minimum of $25.41 Australian per hour. So this includes the farm work as part of your 88 days to get your 2nd and 3rd year visas. This is a huge win for workers, as it means even if you're getting paid piece rate, it must still equate to you getting paid this minimum wage per hour. This means 38 full-time hours per week at this rate would allow you to pocket a lovely 958 Australian dollars per week. Lastly, you will hear the term entitlements, which includes your wages and your salary, annual leave, long service leave, sick leave, redundancy pay, superannuation, and other benefits. The entitlements that you will get will depend on what capacity you work, so whether you're a casual, a part-time, a full-time, or a contracted employee. The main entitlements you will become aware of on the most common working holiday jobs will be things like meal breaks, overtime, late nights, weekend rates, and public holiday pay. So for certain awards like retail, for example, under the National Retail Award, if you are a casual employee, you are entitled to this. We often refer to these as time and a half, double time, etc. You might be wondering, but why do I get paid so much more per hour as a casual? It's in return for not being entitled to part-time and full-time benefits such as sick leave and annual leave. As someone on a working holiday visa, you wouldn't stay in a job long enough to enjoy these benefits, so it's actually a win-win for backpackers. Now onwards to how you can save the most. Overall, we've been able to see a definite pattern emerge as we've been helping thousands of travellers before you who have worked in all kinds of jobs in Australia since we started operating in 2018. So the best option if you want to earn good money and save in a shorter period of time is definitely farm and rural work. The minimum wage is higher, and Australia is a vast agricultural and mining economy, so there is always going to be an abundance of work available across these industries. Other key factors are similar in every country. The further away you travel from major cities, the cheaper the cost of living gets. This is absolutely the case in remote and rural Australia, so working hostels tend to be a lot cheaper, plus there are far less temptations to spend your money on. 9 times out of 10, the only watering hole near where your farm work is the local pub, where pints of beer cost absolutely nothing. You don't have the temptations of big cities where you always want to go shopping, you're constantly paying for transport to get around, and eating and drinking out multiple times per week. The local club is the shed of the working hostel that you've put up some fairy lights in, and someone has plugged in their phone to the only speaker you've seen for kilometers, and that is where the party happens. Turns out no entry fee is required. Now, the work will likely be harder, it is quite character building, but if you want to save larger amounts in a short amount of time, this is your best option. Another tip, if you are considering doing the fruit picking farm jobs, the heavier and the denser the actual fruit, the more likely the pay will be better. So picking smaller berries like blueberries might only pay the minimum wage, which of course is still great, but more money can be earned with produce like citrus, apples, pears, avocados, bananas, mangoes, etc. That's a wrap for this one. I hope you've been able to learn something so far in this YouTube series. Later, we'll be talking you through how to use our free savings planner resource that is an absolute godsend to help you budget and save for your Australian adventure. Plus, we will be creating an entirely separate video again on our tips and tricks to help you properly save for your working holiday. So thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you in the next one.